All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and as we wrap up the year 2023, I want to look back on all of the Star Wars that we got in 2023, from TV shows to movie releases to announcements, and discuss the top 5 worst and top 5 best moments of the year. I did this last year, and it was really fun, and of course, in years moving forward, I hope I don't have to make top 5 worst lists for things that happened in Star Wars in a year. But unfortunately, we're still in a period of Star Wars where it's a bit inconsistent still. We have really high highs in a year, and then those will be counterbalanced with really low lows or really big disappointments in shows that we've come to love. And hey, maybe this is a sick joke by the Force to bring balance to both sides, good and bad. Before I start the list, I just want to set the playing field for you guys and talk about all of the releases, announcements that we got this year in Star Wars. I know this might be shocking to hear, but no, I have not consumed every piece of Star Wars that has come out in the past year. So if I don't mention a book or comic, just understand that no, I didn't get to everything, but these are the main releases and the main things that I took away from Star Wars in the past year. So we had the Ahsoka series, we had Bad Batch Season 2, we had Jedi Survivor, the video game, we had Mandalorian Season 3, Vision Season 2, we had a couple book releases that I'll be discussing. We had Star Wars Celebration in London. We had the Star Wars Outlaws video game trailer, an open world third-person shooter. And then we had 3 movies announced at Star Wars Celebration. We also got some other news about TV shows at Star Wars Celebration, but the movies were the big draw there. Now, having listed everything out for you guys and looking at the list myself, again, this was a year that I kind of alluded to in the beginning, of highs and lows. There were some big surprises, there were some big letdowns, and there were things that absolutely hit the mark. They delivered on what we expected and even exceeded expectations. So I'm excited to get into this list. I wish everything on here delivered, but overall, I would say this was a above average year in Star Wars. Now, since I'm an optimist, I'm going to start with my top 5 best moments of the year. These were moments that blew me away or made me look at Star Wars in a different way again, or just rekindled that love for Star Wars that I'm not saying is ever going to go away, but it just reminded me why I love Star Wars so much. So starting at number 5, I'm going to dive into the publishing world of Star Wars and highlight 2 books this year that I was absolutely enthralled with. I could not put down. I definitely set some records this year on how fast I could read a book because I usually take my time, but these 2 I think I ran through in 2 weeks, which for some people might be an eternity to read a book. But for me, I was like, damn, I read this really fast. I must love it. The first book is Rise of the Red Blade, the story of Iskat Akaris, from her time as a Padawan during the Clone Wars to her ascension in the Inquisitorius. The inciting question of this book is what makes someone become an Inquisitor? And I think this novel makes a very compelling argument. This is a very dark story, one of the darkest that I've experienced in Star Wars. It recontextualizes the Clone Wars and grounds them back in the reality of warfare, where I think the Clone Wars TV show did a great job in certain moments, but in other moments, some of those missions with Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan, there was almost this tone of lightness, and it was almost fun to be at war. But this does the exact opposite. There's pain, there's suffering, there's death on both sides, and Iskat is this great lens into that different side of the war that I think might have been lost in the earlier seasons of Clone Wars. And that's not taking anything away from the show. It's just the reality of it being more geared towards kids in the beginning seasons. And I think Iskat's journey is tragic. We see that she's the representation of the forgotten Padawan, the Padawans that aren't the chosen ones, or the Padawans that don't have these famous masters or even have a master at all. They lose their masters, and they're almost left to aimlessly figure out how to be a Jedi and what to do with the powers that they've been gifted. And these Padawans end up being neglected. So we get a new lens at the Jedi Council and their failures during this time period. And I think Iskat's story is really unique in Star Wars because it deeply explores mental health, anxiety, and self-worth. She consistently has these self-deprecating thoughts, and she's always questioning the world around her. And while she does terrible things, in the end, you can empathize with her because you've seen and witnessed her pain and suffering throughout the story. I think the only gripe I would have with this book is that it is very nihilistic, and I think it does lack a bit of hope. but I think that's the intention of the author, unfortunately, and this is a tragedy through and through. But in Star Wars, I always think there should be some sort of message of hope. That would be my only gripe. But I think you should definitely pick up this book if you are interested in the Inquisitors, learn more about them, and just how someone could fall so far. The second novel comes from Phase 2 of the High Republic, and it's called Cataclysm. This was definitely my favorite novel in Phase 2 of the High Republic, which takes place 100 years before Phase 1 in typical Star Wars fashion. They have to tell the story, and then they have to do a prequel to that story. And this is a hard story to kind of explain and talk about to a broader audience if you haven't read these novels, because it is the second book in Phase 2. But I think I'll just highlight that this is one of the best cast of characters in any Star Wars canon novel. From the Jedi, both Masters and Padawans and Jedi Knights, to Axel Greylark, who is on the cover of this novel, so you knew he was going to be important. But his relationship with his mother is really the heart of this story, his mother being the Chancellor of the Republic. And then the people stuck in the middle of this conflict who aren't aligned with the Republic or the Path of the Open Hand, who are the antagonists of this storyline. From the very start of this book, it's tense. The stakes are always being raised with every page. And by the end, there is a huge bombastic battle called the Night of Sorrow, which I think you could tell by the title is a pretty rough battle for everyone involved. And again, that just speaks to the tension and the stakes throughout this novel and the fact that they're always being ramped up. So if you've read this novel, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't dived or dug into the High Republic yet, I always encourage it. I think it's some of the best Star Wars we have going on right now consistently. So check it out if you haven't. Okay, moving on to number 4 this year. For me, there were a couple shorts in Star Wars Visions Season 2 that blew me away. These shorts were thought-provoking and emotional. And the ones I want to highlight are Screecher's Reach, Spy Dancer, and Sith. Screecher's Reach being my definitive favorite from Season 2. It has horror aspects to it, it's beautifully animated, and it flips the story of Star Wars on its head. It takes the hopeful journey of Luke Skywalker leaving Tatooine and says, what if we do the exact opposite of that and look at it from a dark side lens? And I thought the twist ending was fantastic, and it gives me chills to this day. I don't think Spy Dancer gets enough credit. I absolutely love that this short was grounded in historical events of French dancers who would spy on the Nazis. And that's kind of the premise here. We have these dancers that spy on the Imperials. And again, there's an amazing twist at the end of this story. It's emotional. It's about family. And I think, again, it's extremely unique animation and it's absolutely beautiful. So I think Spy Dancer is extremely underrated and people should talk about it more. And then the final one is Sith, the opening one. A really unique animation style combining 3D, 2D, sketch art, painting, all types of animation and creativity were just thrown into this. The action's really cool. And again, I think a very unique concept by the end with someone accepting their dark side. And you can probably tell there's a bit of a theme here on why I liked these stories. They were just new takes on Star Wars that I hadn't seen before. And that's why Visions is great, because it's a completely open sandbox and people can challenge and test new ideas in the Star Wars galaxy. So Visions Season 2 was definitely a high point for me this year in Star Wars. So moving on to number 3, I'm going to be talking about Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And for the number 3 spot, I'm going to specifically highlight the Jedi Survivor gameplay. I think the story was great. I don't think it was as strong as Fallen Order, but that was a high bar to start with. And there are moments in the game that I really love between Merrin and Cal and their relationship, as well as the twist towards the end. But I think the gameplay here was my favorite aspect of the game, and that's why I'm putting it on this list of best moments in Star Wars for 2023. My biggest request coming into this game was to overhaul the combat system, give me more ways to play, more force powers, more lightsaber stances, more enemies to fight, and I got all of that and more in this game. I look forward to every single combat encounter. I thought the fluidity of the lightsaber combat and the movement of Cal was completely overhauled. It felt so much more natural. I ran dual blade and single blade for most of the game, but I appreciated the other stances and I tested them out throughout the game, which was fun as well. And I think outside combat, I think the puzzles were a lot more fun in this game. I thought the puzzles in Fallen Order were kind of a slog at some points, especially rolling that freaking ball in that Zepho temple. That sucked. I hated that. So overall, I wanted better combat, I wanted better gameplay, and I got it, and that's why it's here at number 3 on the list for best moments of Star Wars in 2023. So number 2, this was the surprise of the year, and boy, was this a fantastic surprise. Bad Batch Season 2 came to play. Not consistently, there were still some of those filler episodes, but I think this season it really came into its own and hit its stride with a lot of these episodes feeling on the level of, if not surpassing Clone Wars in some aspects, which is crazy to say. I never would have said that when I was talking about Bad Batch Season 1, but episodes like Solitary Clone, The Outpost, and Truth and Consequence, the 2-part mid-season finale, blew me away. The political intrigue of Truth and Consequence with Senator Chuchi and what's going to happen to all of these clones and transitioning away from the clone army to conscripted soldiers was so tense, and I loved being back in the Coruscant Senate chamber. Solitary Clone was this beautiful look at Commander Cody and how he's dealt with the trauma of Order 66 and the fallout of that, and him coming to realize, what am I fighting for? What orders am I following at this point? And I think him and Crosshair having that back and forth conversation was just another great piece of the lexicon of clone lore that we've gotten from animation in Star Wars. And then The Outpost just speaks for itself. This extremely character-driven story of Crosshair meeting these forgotten about clones on a desolate, snow-covered planet and coming to realize what his value is as a soldier. Just fantastic. I'm so excited for the future of Bad Batch because of this season, and I know next season is the final season, but I love when shows know when to cut it off, so I'm actually looking forward to it more because they did announce that it would be the final season. And I think, I don't want to get into spoilers, but the ending of this season, there is a huge event that happens, and it made me go, damn, okay, Bad Batch is here to play from now on. So looking forward to Bad Batch. I think Bad Batch Season 2 was the surprise of the year for me, and it was great to just get back to that top-tier animated storytelling that we knew they were capable of, but it felt like they were holding back in Season 1. So before I get to my number 1 favorite moment from Star Wars in 2023, I do want to do a couple honorable mentions. My number 1 ranked honorable mention, because I can do that, is the Star Wars Outlaws trailer. Open world, third-person shooter, focusing on the underground crime syndicate area of the Star Wars galaxy, being able to fly to and from planets, into and out of the atmosphere seamlessly, which we'll see about that. Having a wanted level system like GTA, and also having relationships with the different crime syndicates and that affecting your gameplay. All of it sounds really great, and the gameplay looked pretty basic but fun, which, hopefully they'll keep expanding upon. And it's also going to be story driven, which, is always going to get me excited because I love hearing and seeing new takes on the Star Wars galaxy, and I think this could be a very unique one. Of course, there are some reservations out there because it is being developed by Ubisoft, and we know that their open worlds have become quantity over quality in a lot of their previous games, and it might look pretty on the outside, but the actual gameplay mechanics are very stale. So hoping this is the game that they break the mold and get back to what made them famous in the first place. My second one is the 3 Star Wars movies announced at Celebration. Celebration overall was fantastic this year. I loved tuning in, and I think there were a lot of moments I loved in it, but I think, the big one is obviously the movie announcements. We have Dave Filoni, we have Rey's movie, and we have the Dawn of the Jedi kind of Inception of the Jedi Order movie. So 3 movies taking place across the entire Star Wars galaxy and timeline. I'd love to put this on the list, but as we know with Star Wars, you can never trust a movie announced. These might get canceled. I don't think 2 of them will be canceled, but there's already some rumors about the James Mangold one, so I don't know. You never know with Star Wars movie announcements, but you can't not be excited to have the potential to go back to the theaters and see Star Wars on the big screen. And then the final one was more of a personal thing. It wasn't a Star Wars event, but I was able to see Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back with a full live orchestra. That was such an amazing experience for me and my mom to see. She had never seen it, and she's like, no, I want to do it. And she watched it. She's like, okay, yeah, no, that's really good. I don't think she's ever seen any Star Wars outside of just me watching them. But yeah, you have the best movie in the franchise with some of the best music in the franchise. And, you can't beat hearing a full orchestra in person live. Seeing Yoda lift the X-Wing out of the swamp with the orchestra, mind-blowing. Cloud City and the theme of that being played live, mind-blowing. So it was an amazing personal experience that I definitely could have put on this list. It definitely was one of my favorite moments of Star Wars in the year, but it was a personal thing. It wasn't a moment that all of you could have experienced. So that's why I kind of left it in the honorable mentions category. All right, so here we are. We're at number one. What was the number one favorite moment for Star Wars for me this year? And I'm going to cheat, but I'm going to say Ahsoka, the end of episode 4 going into episode 5. I think that was a moment in Star Wars that the entire Star Wars fandom was behind. The episode 4 lightsaber fights between Sabine and Shin, and then Baylan and Ahsoka, fantastically choreographed. And then we have the very emotional and Star Wars-esque decision from Sabine to give the map to Baylan. We have a very selfish decision by Sabine. No matter how the season wraps up and how much I don't agree with the end of the season, this moment for me was like, wow, here we go. And then episode 5, of course, we have Hayden Christensen back. We have the Clone Wars flashbacks. We have an exploration of Ahsoka's trauma. We get to see Ahsoka from this new lens, someone that doesn't really have a will to live. They're simply just surviving. And I thought the music in the episode was great. I think the new recontextualization of her being a child soldier that maybe we didn't fully understand in the Clone Wars because it was animated, so it was hard to connect to how young she actually was. But seeing her in live action in the middle of a war zone, you're like, damn, okay, actual child soldier. And then the end of the episode is just beautiful. It's beautiful. From the moment Ahsoka wakes up, she convenes with the Purrgil, and they do the hyperspace jump. Still, my favorite piece of Star Wars score from this year is Hyperspace Jump from the Ahsoka album. It takes the theme of the show, blows it up, and I get chills listening to it to this day. So it was just a complete Star Wars experience that by the end of it, I was like, damn, that was all-time Star Wars right there. And while this is my favorite moment of the year, there is still that piece of me that wishes we saw this in animation. I did a whole episode on that, but I think the execution of it in live action was just fantastic. And I'm going to plug a previous episode, but please, if you haven't already, go back and listen to my episode covering episode 5 of the Ahsoka series. It's one of my best episodes ever, I think. I spent so much time on the script, re-recording, making sure that everything was right because I wanted to do that episode justice in my analysis and the way that I broke it down and added commentary to it. And as a Clone Wars fan that grew up with Ahsoka from 2008, this just felt like a culmination of her journey and my journey with her. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I'm so proud of it. Go back, would really appreciate it. But that completes my top 5 best moments of Star Wars in 2023 list. There was a lot of great stuff, but now it's time to go to the blunders. And there were many. Let me tell you, there were many. Gotta put on my serious face now. No more happy talk. We're going deep. Number 5, Bad Batch, filler episodes and inconsequential episodes. I think for as many great episodes that there were in season 2, and my new perception of the show because of those fantastic episodes, they still could not help themselves from doing episodes that really just didn't need to be there. And it slows down the momentum of the show, the pacing of the show. It makes it hard for me to recommend the show. And it was just an identity crisis where the show didn't know what it wanted to be. Did it want to be a more mature look at this time period in the Star Wars galaxy? Or did it want to be a show like season 1 of Clone Wars, where episodes were very focused on kids? And I think this show should have just embraced the fact that it is a show about military veterans who deserted their military when it became a branch of a tyrannical government ran by a Sith Lord and the consequences and fallout of them killing their former generals. Not the Bad Batch, but clones overall. It's a dark premise. It's a dark show. It should just be that. And unfortunately, there are just tonal inconsistencies throughout. And I'm not saying there can't be moments of levity in the dark times. I know Star Wars can do that, but I think there were just too many in this show, and it bogged down season 2 and prevented it from being a season of Star Wars television that I'd hold in very, very high regard if these episodes were taken out. So unfortunately, Bad Batch couldn't shake that fully for season 2, but I'm hoping for season 3, it's all hands on deck, fully embrace the tone and story and time period, and just give me another amazing season of animated Star Wars. All right, number 4. This is, this one's a tough one because it's something that's probably not going to stop, and it's the biggest blemish on Star Wars, and that's movies and video games getting canceled. And the funny thing about it is the actual reports that say these things are canceled or no longer being worked for are also inconsistent. Knights of the Old Republic remake, the video game, has been said to be canceled, then it's not canceled, then it's being worked on, then it's not being worked on. Multiple times, even in the past couple weeks. And in my head, it's just canceled at this point. They say it might be worked on, but I don't think it is. Patty Jenkins, her Rogue Squadron movie, I think definitely got put in the can for good this year. Did I need a Rogue Squadron movie? No, but I think, a Top Gun-esque Star Wars story with a director as prolific as Patty Jenkins could be really great. And at the end of the day, I would have been happy to see that. David Lindelof, I think he wrote The Leftovers. He was a writer on the Rey movie. He walked away from the project, so now Stephen Knight is writing the script, I believe. He's the writer of Peaky Blinders, so again, prolific writer, but just having people drop off these projects is really just sad to see because these are some of the top talent in the industry, and that we can't keep them in Star Wars, which is sad because Star Wars used to be the pinnacle. People used to be like, yeah, I want to do Star Wars. And now it seems like an afterthought for a lot of people, unfortunately. The Kevin Feige movie, which, I don't even know if I ever believed this was a thing, but apparently that is now not happening. If it ever was a thing, it is canceled. I really don't know. I don't have much else to give on that one, but you guys get the picture. It was another year of canceled movies, canceled video games. That is just extremely frustrating, and I think any other executive in this position would have been fired by now, but somehow Kathleen Kennedy has kept her job. And it's not me piling on to the hate train of Kathleen Kennedy. It's just accountability. If the team sucks, the coach is the problem. It's just what it is. I mean, I'm sorry. You have to, if you're in a position of leadership, the accountability and the weight of what happens and the state of the franchise, it falls on you. So that's what it is. I'm not jumping on a hate train on Kathleen Kennedy. It's just facts. That's what it is. All right, moving on to number 3, going back to video games. And I think a lot of people may say, oh, this seems a little high, Mark. I think you're being a little too tough on this one. But I think it actually highlights a very bad problem we have in the video game portion of Star Wars outside of just canceling video games. But I would say the Jedi Survivor release date. The game was unplayable for some people. The frame rates were awful. It was crashing their computers. Their Xboxes were not playing it well. I had it on PS5. I didn't run into any major things because apparently the PS5 version was the best version performance-wise. But I can't lie to you and say that going into the open world portion of the main hub world and getting like 20 frames per second going play-by-play, trying to move was a bit disheartening because it was something you were looking forward to, and it was something they're like, oh, look, we have this big open world for you to explore, and then, you're going frame by frame trying to traverse it, and it kind of takes that magic and immersion away, and I just had to acknowledge that because I think it killed a lot of momentum behind the game from a review aspect, and frankly, people probably picked it up, were really excited, and then they kind of got bored of it, or they were upset that the performance was so bad, and they stopped playing it, so I think it not only ruined it for people that did play through it, but I think it also stopped people from experiencing it. So I think it was a huge blunder. I think it's really unfortunate because Jedi Fallen Order, people love that game, and I do too, but I do not forget how bad some of the performance was in that game. On Kashyyyk, there would be like a 5-second loading screen going from area to area sometimes. And you would figure going into the next console generation on PS5 that performance wouldn't be the thing we would have issues with, but, unfortunately it was. And I think this just highlights a problem that Star Wars video games are in a weird state. I mean, Battlefront 2, after several years of updates, is fantastic, but the release date of that game was terrible, and the loot boxes were criminal. Battlefront 1, if I remember correctly, just was a great experience, but didn't have a lot of content. And again, the microtransactions in it were not great. I already talked about Knights of the Old Republic probably being canceled, and Eclipse being in this weird state where I don't even know if we'll ever see that game. So it makes me worried about the future of Star Wars video games and the fact that even our best in the Jedi series is having pretty major issues. And I'm hoping that Outlaws does not have them, but it's Ubisoft. We never know. So that's my number 3. Might seem like a small thing, but I think it is a bigger thing than people may give it credit for. All right, so number 2, again, this was really tough, but the final 2 episodes of the Ahsoka series. I think everything that was built up going into episode 7 was really great. I was so excited about the series. And then unfortunately, the last 2 episodes fell into a lot of bad writing, convenience writing just to get characters from one place to another, not exploring character emotions, just kind of, oh, we found Ezra. Okay, is Ezra going to talk to Sabine about her decision or why she's there? How'd you get there? Nope, we're just going to push that off. Thrawn, this super genius, is going to allow our heroes to complete a forward ground assault unimpeded right into his base, and then he's going to keep his Star Destroyer 5 feet from the top of the spire so that our heroes have a chance to jump on board instead of just moving his ship to the atmosphere because convenience. Baylan and Shin are going to have a kind of awkward split up, and we don't get real finales for them. They're just non-existent in the last episode. And then some of the action just feeling very stale. Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra fighting the night troopers at the bottom of the spire, just standing in a line. Ahsoka seemingly forgiving Sabine for making a terrible decision and allowing Thrawn to enter the galaxy again. Of course, I think the point is to say, since Ahsoka has made mistakes in her past and she's going through healing, she needs to be understanding and she needs to be there for her student. But again, there has to be some internal consequences for our characters. They can't just do these terrible things and then get away with it. And maybe that's something we explore next season, but I think right now it's very odd that Sabine is kind of hailed as a hero here, being able to use the Force, saving Ezra, but also allowing Thrawn to have a chance to enter the galaxy again. So maybe it's something we'll explore in the future, but I'm not sure. But yeah, there were just a lot of things that felt stale about these final 2 episodes. It felt like the bad Disney Star Wars that we are unfortunately kind of getting used to now. And that's really sad because I think the first 6 episodes were great. I think they were great. So you could go back and listen to my Ahsoka reviews. I talk about them all. I got plenty of hate comments on some of my analysis videos of Thrawn and his pretty below average tactics, even though he's supposed to be this super tactical genius. People were defending him. And I think one of my favorite YouTubers, Thor Skywalker, put it really well. He basically said, there's an air to the character of Thrawn. People know him from the books, from Legends. Even people who haven't read the books or watched Rebels know of Thrawn because people are like, oh, this guy Thrawn, this character is amazing. So people go in with these preconceived notions of the character instead of saying, is this character well written if this is my first time experiencing him? And I think the answer is no. I think at some moments he's great. I think Lars' performance as him is great. But I think the tactics that we're seeing him use, especially in this last 2 episodes, are very not Thrawn-like. But people are making excuses because it's Thrawn. We know Thrawn. It's fine. It's fine. He won. But I think if this was a brand new character, people would not have that same sentiment towards him. So those are most of my thoughts on the final 2 episodes of Ahsoka and why I put it at number 2 on my top 5 blunders of the year in Star Wars in 2023. Definitely go check out my full reviews of those episodes because I go a lot more into detail on why I think they are such a quality drop. And speaking of quality drop, my number one biggest blunder, worst moment of Star Wars 2023, and the fact that I haven't even talked about this show at all outside of listing what came out this year, I think is a big indicator of the quality drop and lack of impact that Mandalorian Season 3 had on us this year. Did I have a sneaking suspicion of the quality drop that Season 3 would bring of Mandalorian? Yes, as I talked about last year, having Grogu and Mando meet up outside their show in Book of Boba Fett before Season 3 of Mandalorian and having this emotional finale of Season 2 pretty much be wiped away outside of their show did not set up Season 3 for success. And I think it's very apparent that Grogu and Mando probably weren't supposed to be together at the beginning of the season and throughout this season, but were forced to be put together because of Disney executives saying, hey, no, we need Grogu to be front and center in the series. This is so hard to talk about because there's so many things that went wrong with this season. So I'm going to try and just highlight most of them, but it might turn into a rant. So, sit back and relax. But, the season opens with a recap episode because for people that didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, they have no idea why Mando and Grogu are back together. They have no idea why Mando is going to Mandalore to bathe in the living waters because that was told to him in the Book of Boba Fett by the Armorer. So his whole journey this season was predicated on something that happened outside of his show. We have a stupid droid arc in the beginning of this season where they have to get IG-88 or IG-11 back together, but then he becomes superfluous to actually going to the living waters of Mandalore because Mando ends up just testing the air himself, and he's like, yeah, no, it's good, we're good, it's safe. I like Bo-Katan being more present this season, but the whole lore surrounding her taking off her helmet, having the Darksaber, being owed the Darksaber, being given the Darksaber, but not being allowed to be given the Darksaber, but actually because of a technicality, she can now have the Darksaber, became extremely convoluted and convenient. Moff Gideon is a shell of his former character. He makes a lot of dumb decisions. He's not intimidating. He goes from being this calculated, cold leader to a mustache-twirling villain. Best example is when he knows that Mando and them are going after his clones, and he stands outside the door of where his clones are and doesn't defend them, and then when Mando destroys them, he says, no, how did you destroy my clones? It's like, well, he went to the room that he was going to, and yeah, so that happened. I think everyone already knows the Guns for Hire episode with Lizzo, Jack Black, and Christopher Lloyd was completely out of place, not even just in this show, at this portion of the show. I think just tonally it didn't feel like a Star Wars show. It felt like a Disney show at that point. No idea why they went about that. This is no judgment or malice towards Jack Black, Lizzo, and Christopher Lloyd. I'm so happy they were in Star Wars. I just wish it was in a better place because I think they were just wasted here. And I'll end this section on The Mandalorian by saying that The Mandalorian's best days are behind it. It's sad to say, it's sad to see, because this was the flagship series for Star Wars. It was a unifier for Star Wars and non-Star Wars fans. It was a cultural phenomenon. But I think the show at this point is being determined by external factors and not creative factors. And by that I mean the fact that Grogu and Mando were put back together, I don't think came from Jon Favreau. I think that came from the executives. The fact that Pedro Pascal will likely not show his face again in Season 4 due to scheduling conflicts with his other projects that he's working on guarantees that the character of Din Djarin will again feel stagnant and not move forward. Those emotional scenes that capped off Season 1 and Season 2 with him taking off the helmet are simply not possible in Season 4, and after Season 3 of not having any of those type of moments, again, it feels like the show is no longer moving forward with its characters. That's not to take anything away from the stunt performers that bring Din to life, the two other actors who portray him during action sequences and bringing him some of his physicality. But Pedro Pascal is the face of the character, and if you don't show that face again and have those connections between him and Grogu, I don't see the show reaching the heights that it used to reach. So I just think at the end of the day, it's going to be very hard for this show to recapture the magic of the early seasons, if ever. But as always, I'd love to be proved wrong, but it just feels like this season was the beginning of the nail in the coffin for Mando. And with the guarantee that Pedro won't be in the next season outside of The Voice, again, it feels like the show will not really advance any further than it is right now. So that's the end of my lists. I think, unfortunately, I had to end it on a bummer of a note, but I did want to start with the optimistic stuff in the front of the episode. But yeah, I definitely want to hear all of your thoughts on this year in Star Wars, your favorite moments, your least favorite moments. And you can let me know by following me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. Would love to talk some Star Wars with you guys. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please give it a rating on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And here's hoping that I will no longer have to make top 5 worst moments of the year anymore in 2024. Thanks again for listening. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.